Imagine standing in the heart of a city that has thrived for over 1,000 years, its streets perfectly aligned, its structures enduring earthquakes and floods, its water systems still flowing, and yet not one single blueprint was ever drawn to create it. How is that even possible? We're so used to the idea that great achievements require detailed plans, complex calculations, and teams of specialists working from meticulously drafted documents. But long before computers or even paper blueprints existed, there were engineers, visionaries, really, who designed entire cities using nothing more than intuition, observation, and knowledge passed down through generations. These forgotten master builders understood their materials, their landscapes, and their people in a way that allowed them to shape urban spaces of astonishing beauty, functionality, and resilience. We're going to journey back in time to uncover the secrets of these intuitive engineers, the women and men who designed some of history's most iconic urban wonders without ever putting pen to paper. From the hydraulic networks of Petra, carved directly into rose-red cliffs, to the celestial alignments of Teotihuacan, where pyramids mirror the movements of the stars, these builders worked in profound harmony with the natural world. They read the land like an open book, listened to the stories of their elders, and used simple tools to achieve precision that still leaves modern experts in awe. Their methods were rooted in deep cultural wisdom, community collaboration, and a respect for nature that we are only beginning to rediscover today. This isn't just a story about the past, it's about what these ancient approaches can teach us as we face the challenges of modern urbanization, climate change, and the search for more meaningful ways to design the places we live. What made their cities so sustainable? How did they build structures that have outlasted empires? And why have their contributions been so overlooked in the dominant narratives of engineering and architecture? In this video, we'll explore these questions and more, venturing into the minds and methods of the builders who shaped civilization not with rigid plans, but with adaptive genius. So settle in, you're about to discover a hidden chapter in human creativity, one that might just change how you see the world around you. Think about the last time you walked through an old city. Maybe you noticed how the streets curved gently, how buildings seem to nestle into the landscape, or how the space just feels right. That sense of harmony isn't accidental. It comes from a time when engineering was less about drafting detailed plans and more about deeply understanding the world through intuition, experience, and lived wisdom. Long before blueprints standardized construction, engineers and builders relied on something far more nuanced, a visceral connection to their materials, their environment, and the communities they served. This wasn't guesswork. It was a highly refined form of knowledge cultivated over lifetimes and passed carefully from one generation to the next. Take something as monumental as the Roman aqueducts. These stunning structures carried water across vast distances, down to the millimeter of precision, without any of the detailed schematics we'd expect today. How did they do it? Engineers used simple tools citing poles, water levels, and their own understanding of gravity to align each section. They read the land, noting subtle slopes and natural contours, and adapted their designs in real time. There were no rigid plans insisting on a predetermined path. Instead, the route unfolded responsively, shaped by the terrain it crossed. This flexibility meant that each aqueduct was not just functional but uniquely suited to its environment, efficient, durable, and beautifully integrated into the landscape. This intuitive approach meant that builders developed an almost intimate relationship with their materials. A stonemason wouldn't just cut blocks to a specified size. He would know how a particular type of stone responded to pressure, weather, or time. He understood its grain, its strengths, its weaknesses. That knowledge came from hands-on work, from trial and error, from watching and learning under a master. There was no manual to consult. The design existed in the minds and muscles of the builders themselves. It was knowledge carried in the hands, expressed through action, and refined through repetition. You can see this in the dry stone walls of the Scottish Highlands, fitted so perfectly that they stand for centuries without mortar, or in the timber framing of Japanese temples, joined with such precision that they flex and endure through earthquakes. And it wasn't just about materials or gravity, it was about people. These intuitive engineers designed for human experience. They knew how the sun moved across a courtyard, where the wind blew strongest, how sound traveled, where water would gather after rain. They designed spaces that felt comfortable, safe, and alive. In places like the ancient city of Petra, builders carved structures directly into the rock face, using natural caves and canyons to provide shade, shelter, and strategic defense. The city feels like an extension of the landscape because it is the engineers worked with the environment rather than against it, creating something both practical and poetic. What's fascinating is that this absence of blueprints didn't mean an absence of precision. In fact, it often allowed for greater adaptability and resilience. When you're not bound by a fixed drawing, you can adjust as you build, responding to unexpected challenges, incorporating new ideas, or adapting to changes in the community's needs. Each project became a dialogue between the builders, the materials, and the land. This resulted in designs that were sustainable long before the word entered our vocabulary. Structures that used local resources, required minimal energy, and stood the test of time because they belonged exactly where they were. There's a humility in this approach that feels almost radical today. These engineers didn't assume they could dominate nature with their designs. Instead, they listened to it. They observed, learned, and collaborated with the world around them. In doing so, they created some of the most enduring and harmonious structures in human history, not in spite of having no blueprints, but because of it. But how do you teach intuition? How do you pass down something that isn't written down? This is where the human element truly came to the forefront, through a powerful combination of oral tradition and hands-on apprenticeship. Imagine a young person, maybe 12 or 13 years old, joining the worksite of a master builder. There were no textbooks to read, no lectures to attend. Their education was the work itself. They started with the most basic tasks, perhaps mixing mortar, fetching tools, or preparing stones, and all the while they were watching, listening, and absorbing. The master wouldn't just show them how to carve a stone. He would explain why this particular angle was cut, how the grain of the rock would affect its strength, and which chisel to use after a rainstorm when the stone was damp. This knowledge was shared through stories, through proverbs, through warnings and encouragement delivered right there at the workbench. It was a continuous, living conversation between experience and eagerness to learn. This system was formalized in places like medieval Europe through craft guilds. These weren't just trade unions, they were the guardians of an entire ecosystem of knowledge. To become a master mason, for instance, an apprentice would spend years under a master's tutelage, followed by more years as a journeyman, traveling to different cities to learn new techniques and see how other builders solved problems. The guilds controlled the quality of work and, crucially, protected the secrets of the craft. The exact recipe for a specific type of mortar that could set underwater, the precise method for cutting a complex joint in a roof truss, the subtle art of aligning a foundation, these were not written in manuals. They were closely held, verbally transmitted treasures. This ensured that standards remained incredibly high and that knowledge was earned through dedication and practice, not just copied from a page. This method of learning created a profoundly different kind of understanding. It's the difference between being told the recipe for a dish and spending years cooking alongside a master chef. The apprentice learns to feel when the dough is right, to smell when the sauce is perfectly reduced, to adjust the heat instinctively. Similarly, a stonemason's apprentice developed a feel for the material that no blueprint could ever convey. He learned to listen to the sound the chisel made against different types of stone, a sound that told an experienced ear if the cut was true or if the rock was likely to fracture. This was knowledge embedded in the hands, the ears, and the eyes, of physical, tactile wisdom. And because this knowledge was lived and not just documented, it was inherently adaptable. When these builders encountered a new type of stone in a quarry or an unexpected spring while digging foundations, they didn't have to go back to the drawing board. They had a deep reservoir of practical problem solving to draw from. They had seen their masters adapt before. They remembered the stories of past challenges and how they were overcome. This created a resilient, flexible approach to engineering that could respond to the unexpected in real time. The library of construction was not on a shelf. It was in the collective memory and skilled hands of the community of builders, a repository of wisdom that grew richer with each generation and every new project they undertook together. Now consider the sheer ambition of these projects. How do you ensure that a massive temple complex feels harmonious, or that a towering pyramid doesn't collapse under its own weight without a detailed plan to follow? The answer lies in a universal language understood by builders across the ancient world, the language of geometry and proportion. This wasn't the abstract math we learn in school today. It was a sacred, living system of ratios and relationships that connected human creation to the perceived order of the cosmos. For these master builders, numbers and shapes held deep symbolic meaning. A specific ratio wasn't just a calculation, it was a reflection of divine harmony, a pattern found in everything from the spiral of a seashell to the orbit of the planets. By weaving these proportions into their structures, they were doing more than just building. They were aligning their work with the fundamental principles of the universe. This profound understanding is vividly clear in monuments like the Parthenon in Athens. To the naked eye, it appears as a masterpiece of straight lines and perfect balance. But in reality, there's almost no straight line in the entire structure. The columns bulge slightly in the middle, a technique called intosses, and the base curves upward at the center. These weren't mistakes or optical illusions. They were intentional corrections based on a deep geometric wisdom. The builders knew that perfectly straight lines would actually appear to sag to the human eye, so they used these subtle curves to create a true impression of perfection. The entire design is based on a complex web of ratios like the golden mean, which creates a sense of balance that feels instinctively right. This ratio, approximately 1.618 to 1, appears throughout nature and was considered the key to aesthetic beauty. They didn't need a printed diagram of this ratio. They knew how to construct it using nothing more than a compass and a piece of rope, and they embedded it into the very soul of the building. This application of sacred geometry extended far beyond single buildings to the layout of entire cities. In ancient Egypt, the placement of the Great Pyramid of Giza is a staggering feat of precision and astronomical alignment. Its sides are aligned almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions north, south, east, and west, with an error margin smaller than 1/15 of a degree. How was this possible without modern surveying equipment? Engineers likely used the stars, tracking the circular path of a particular star around the celestial pole to find true north. The pyramid's dimensions also encode mathematical constants, with the ratio of its perimeter to its height equaling 2 times pi. This suggests a breathtakingly advanced understanding of geometric principles that were memorized, applied, and passed down through an oral tradition, turning a massive pile of stones into a permanent monument to celestial and mathematical order. The tools for this work were elegantly simple but required immense skill to use effectively. A knotted rope could become a measuring tape and a calculator for determining right angles using Pythagorean triples, a principle understood long before Pythagoras gave it his name. A simple compass could scratch perfect circles into stone slabs, defining the curves of arches and the plans of rotundas. These tools made the geometry portable, reproducible, and adaptable to any site. A master could arrive at a new location with his ropes and rods and begin laying out a city grid or a temple foundation with confidence, knowing the proportions would hold true whether the project was large or small. This system of universal ratios provided a perfect recipe for scalability, ensuring that a small shrine felt as harmonious as a grand cathedral because they both followed the same sacred rules. Ultimately, this use of geometry was about far more than structural integrity or even beauty. It was about meaning. A city designed with cosmic proportions was a constant reminder to its inhabitants that they were part of a larger, orderly universe. Walking down a street aligned with the rising sun on the equinox, or praying in a temple whose dimensions echoed the proportions of the human body, created a deep, subconscious connection between the individual, the community, and the cosmos. The builders were not just constructing walls and roofs, they were weaving a tapestry of stone, space, and spirit, crafting an environment that nourished the soul as surely as it sheltered the body. Now let's take a journey to the heart of the Cambodian jungle, where the ancient city of Angkor stands as a breathtaking testament to what intuitive engineering could achieve. At its peak, this was the largest pre-industrial city in the world, a sprawling metropolis that supported nearly 1 million people, and the entire civilization was built around one of the most sophisticated water management systems ever created, all designed and built without a single blueprint. The Khmer engineers didn't fight the environment. They developed a profound conversation with it, learning to read the land and the sky with an intimacy we can scarcely imagine today. Their greatest challenge was the region's extreme monsoon climate. For half the year, torrential rains would flood the plains, and for the other half, a severe drought would parch the land. Instead of seeing this as a problem, the Khmer saw it as an opportunity. They observed how water flowed across the topography, noting the natural depressions and the subtle slopes of the land. Using this knowledge, they sculpted the earth on a colossal scale. They dug gigantic reservoirs called barrays, some stretching over 5 miles long and 1 mile wide. These weren't just simple holes in the ground. They were precisely positioned to capture and store the immense volume of monsoon rainwater. But the real genius was in the distribution network, a vast, intricate web of canals, moats, and channels that acted like arteries, carrying this life-giving water to every corner of the city and its surrounding rice fields. This system was a masterpiece of passive engineering. The canals were dug at just the right gradients to ensure a steady, controlled flow of water without the need for pumps or complex machinery. During the dry season, the stored water would be gradually released to irrigate the crops, transforming what would have been a barren landscape into a year-round agricultural powerhouse. This reliable food supply is what allowed Angkor to sustain its enormous population. Furthermore, the moats surrounding the temple complexes, like the iconic Angkor Wat, weren't merely for defense or decoration. They played a critical role in stabilizing the water table, preventing the massive stone structures from shifting or sinking during the dramatic wet and dry cycles. Perhaps most remarkably, this entire hydraulic network was deeply intertwined with the spiritual and symbolic world of the Khmer people. The layout wasn't just functional, it was a mirror of the Hindu cosmos. The giant barrays represented the oceans surrounding the sacred Mount Meru, the home of the gods, which was symbolized by the Temple Mountain at the center of the city. The engineers were not just moving water, they were building a cosmological model in stone and earth. The alignment of canals and reservoirs often corresponded with celestial events, further binding the practical needs of the city to the spiritual beliefs of its people. This seamless blend of the practical and the profound created a city that was not only efficient and resilient but also deeply meaningful to everyone who lived there. The legacy of Angkor's water system is a powerful lesson in sustainability. For centuries, it managed a precious resource with elegant efficiency, supporting a vast population in a challenging environment. It's a stunning example of how observational engineering, rooted in a deep, intuitive understanding of natural patterns, can create solutions that are both monumentally successful and beautifully harmonious with the world. This philosophy of working in partnership with the land, rather than imposing a foreign design upon it, reaches one of its most spectacular expressions high in the Andes Mountains. The Incan citadel of Machu Picchu wasn't just placed on a mountain, it was woven into the very fabric of the peak itself. Unlike modern developers who might level a hilltop to create a flat building pad, the Incan engineers saw the challenging, earthquake-prone slopes not as an obstacle, but as the primary material for their design. They began by reading the mountain, understanding its geology, its water flow, and its weaknesses. Their first and most crucial step was to create a stable foundation, and they did this by constructing over 700 terraces that cascade down the mountainsides. These weren't simple flat steps for farming, they were sophisticated retaining walls designed to solve multiple problems at once. The construction of these terraces was a masterclass in intuitive geotechnical engineering. Each wall was built with a slight inward tilt, and its foundation was composed of layers of different sized stones. At the bottom, large boulders provided a solid base. Above that, smaller stones acted as a drainage layer, and the top was filled with fertile soil. This intricate layering wasn't sketched out on a plan. It was a technique perfected through generations of understanding how to manage water and soil pressure on a steep incline. During the heavy rainy seasons, this system prevented catastrophic landslides by allowing water to seep through the walls instead of building up behind them, effectively turning the entire mountainside into a stable, gravity-driven drainage system. The terraces also created microclimates. The stone walls absorbed heat from the sun during the day and radiated it back at night, protecting delicate crops like maize from frost and allowing for a diversity of agriculture at an altitude where it would otherwise be impossible. But the engineering genius didn't stop at the surface. Beneath the city lies a hidden world of water management that is still fully operational after more than 500 years. The Incans carved channels into the bedrock to capture fresh spring water at a high point on the mountain. This water was then guided through a network of stone conduits that used gravity to distribute it to a series of 16 ceremonial fountains throughout the city. The slope of each channel was calculated with astonishing precision, not with lasers, but with simple water levels and an intimate knowledge of hydraulics to maintain a consistent, gentle flow that neither stagnated nor eroded the stone. Furthermore, the entire city is underpinned by deep, stone-lined drainage systems that channel rainfall and groundwater away from the foundations, preventing saturation and erosion that would have quickly destroyed the structures. This innate understanding of hydrology and geology meant the city could withstand the immense environmental pressures of its location. This symbiotic approach resulted in unparalleled resilience. The flexible, mortar-free stonework of the buildings, where stones are perfectly shaped to fit together like a puzzle, allows the structures to dance during an earthquake instead of cracking. The terraces absorb and redistribute the seismic energy, and the drainage systems ensure the ground beneath never turns to mud. Machu Picchu stands as a powerful testament to a design philosophy that listens to the land. The Incan engineers didn't seek to conquer the mountain. They asked it how to build, and in doing so, they created a city that has endured for centuries as a seamless part of the landscape, a collaboration between human intellect and the natural world that continues to inspire awe and humility in equal measure. It's almost unbelievable to consider the scale of what these ancient builders accomplished with such humble equipment. They didn't have theodolites or GPS, yet they laid out roads that stretched for thousands of miles with barely a deviation. The secret to this precision wasn't in the complexity of their tools, but in the profound skill of the people who wielded them. A Roman surveyor, known as an agrimensor, would arrive at a site with his groma, a remarkably simple instrument consisting of a vertical staff with a crossarm. From each end of the crossarm, a plumb bob hung on a string. By sighting across these perfectly vertical lines, the surveyor could establish impeccable right angles and straight lines across the landscape. This tool in the hands of a master was all it took to plot the course of a road that would endure for millennia, its route so direct that many modern highways still follow the same path today. The true genius of these simple instruments lay in their direct connection to the physical world. A plumb bob, nothing more than a weighted string, always points to the center of the earth, defining a true vertical. A water level, a simple trough of water, finds a perfectly level plane every time. These tools provided instantaneous, unambiguous feedback. There was no calibration needed, no software to update, no risk of a drained battery leaving a project stranded. Their reliability was based on the immutable laws of physics. This directness forced the engineer to develop a deep, intuitive feel for the work. He wasn't just reading numbers off a digital display. He was interpreting the slight sway of a plumb line in the wind, judging the stillness of water in a trough, and understanding how these elemental forces interacted with the materials at hand. This on-the-ground, tactile approach created an environment ripe for spontaneous innovation, because the engineer was right there, engaged with the site and its unique conditions. He could solve problems as they emerged. Imagine a team laying out a road and encountering an unexpected marsh or a particularly rocky outcrop. With a fixed blueprint, the solution might have been costly and time-consuming, requiring a redesign back at an office. But for the Roman engineer with his groma, the solution was immediate. He could make a slight, elegant adjustment to the route on the spot, perhaps shifting the path just enough to find firmer ground, all while maintaining the overall alignment and gradient. This flexibility resulted in designs that were not only precise but also supremely practical and resilient, perfectly adapted to the realities of the terrain. The mastery required to use these tools effectively cannot be overstated. It was a form of high art, knowing exactly how to position the groma to account for a sloping hill, or how to use a set of calibrated rods to measure distances over uneven ground, was knowledge earned through years of experience. This wasn't a matter of following instructions. It was about developing an instinct. The relationship between the tool and the craftsman was symbiotic. The tool provided the fundamental truth of gravity or level, and the craftsman provided the wisdom, experience, and creative vision to apply that truth to the chaotic, unpredictable reality of a construction site. This partnership between human intuition and simple, reliable technology is what built the enduring wonders of the ancient world. proving that sometimes the most sophisticated tool is a well-trained mind guiding a perfectly simple instrument. But the vision of these ancient planners extended far beyond the earthly realm, reaching directly for the stars. For them, a city was not just a collection of buildings. It was a mirror of the cosmos, a sacred diagram written in stone and earth that connected the lives of its inhabitants to the eternal cycles of the universe. This wasn't merely an artistic choice, it was a fundamental principle of design, where every street, temple, and plaza was imbued with celestial significance. The sky was their ultimate blueprint, a dynamic map they learned to read with breathtaking accuracy through generations of patient observation. We can see this profound connection with stunning clarity at Teotihuacan, the magnificent city of the gods, located outside modern-day Mexico City. The entire urban plan is a cosmic map. The central artery, known today as the Avenue of the Dead, runs for over 2 miles, flanked by massive pyramids. Its alignment is not arbitrary. Archaeoastronomers have discovered that from the vantage point of the Temple of the Sun, the avenue is precisely oriented to the point on the horizon where the Pleiades star cluster sets. This cluster, known to many ancient cultures as the Seven Sisters, held immense importance in Mesoamerican cosmology, associated with creation, the agricultural cycle, and the passage of time. By aligning their city to this celestial marker, the builders of Teotihuacan were anchoring their world to the heavens, ensuring that the rhythm of the city was in sync with the rhythm of the stars. This practice of celestial alignment was a global phenomenon. In ancient Egypt, the temple complex of Karnak is a masterclass in solar symbolism. Its main axis is oriented so that on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the rising sun would shine directly through the entrance, down the long, darkened hypostyle hall, and illuminate the inner sanctum where the statue of the god Amun-Ra resided. This dramatic event, achieved without a single written calculation, transformed the temple from a static building into a dynamic instrument of light and time. It was a powerful, annual reaffirmation of the pharaoh's divine connection and the sun god's triumph over darkness, experienced directly by the participating priests and the community. The entire architecture was designed to facilitate this moment, proving that the most sophisticated engineering could be deployed in the service of spiritual meaning. Achieving these precise alignments required a deep, ritualized form of knowledge. It wasn't a matter of an architect simply drawing a line on a map. The process was likely surrounded by ceremony and presided over by priest astronomers who spent their lives watching the sky. They would have used simple but effective tools, a row of stakes in the ground to mark the rising and setting points of a star over an entire year, or a basin of still water to use as a reflective horizon for observing celestial events. This knowledge was sacred, passed down through oral tradition and ritual reenactment. The act of laying out the city's foundations would have been a ceremonial act in itself, a collaborative effort that bound the community together under a shared cosmic order. The result of this holistic approach was an urban environment that was psychologically and spiritually nourishing. Imagine living in a city where your main street was literally the earthly path of a star cluster, or where the first light of the new year flooded the most sacred space in your community. Your daily life was constantly, subtly reinforced by these cosmic connections. The city wasn't just a place to live, it was a living, breathing entity that told a story about humanity's place in the universe. It provided a sense of order, meaning, and belonging that is often missing from our modern, geometrically perfect but sometimes soul-less urban grids. These ancient engineers understood that a truly successful city doesn't just house the body, it must also speak to the spirit, weaving the practical needs of survival into a larger, more magnificent tapestry of cosmic wonder. While master builders and celestial alignments played a crucial role, some of the most resilient urban designs emerged not from a single visionary, but from the collective wisdom of the entire community. This was a profoundly different approach to city building, one where the design was a living, evolving conversation rather than a top-down decree. In these societies, the very layout of a city was a physical manifestation of shared values, social structures, and generations of accumulated local knowledge. The process was inherently democratic, drawing on the insights of elders who understood the land's history, artisans who mastered the materials, and everyday families who knew best how a space needed to function for daily life. A powerful example of this collective genius is the ancient city of Great Zimbabwe, a sprawling stone complex in southern Africa. Its magnificent walls and enclosures weren't designed by a lone architect with a grand plan. Instead, the city's form grew organically from the Shona people's social and spiritual practices. The layout reflects a clear social hierarchy, with the king's residence and sacred spaces situated on the highest ground for both strategic advantage and symbolic importance. The walls, constructed using a unique dry stone technique that required no mortar, were built by skilled artisans whose knowledge was passed down through families. The curves and openings of the structures were influenced by cultural norms, creating spaces that facilitated community gatherings, provided privacy for different family units, and integrated seamlessly with the natural rock formations of the landscape. This wasn't a design imposed on the environment. It was a design that emerged from a deep, collective understanding of both people and place. This participatory process ensured that the final product was exquisitely tailored to the needs of its inhabitants. Because the people who would live in and use the spaces were directly involved in their creation, the city was inherently human-centric. Walkways were naturally shaded by the positioning of buildings to block the afternoon sun. Courtyards were sized for community festivals, and water collection points were placed along the paths most frequently traveled. The design evolved through use and adaptation. If a pathway became too muddy during the rains, the community might collectively decide to pave it with stones or reroute it slightly. If a new family group joined the settlement, they would add their homestead in a way that respected existing social structures and land use. This constant, gentle refinement made the city incredibly adaptable to changing circumstances, whether social, environmental, or economic. The absence of a rigid, centralized blueprint was this system's greatest strength. It allowed for a fluidity and responsiveness that fixed plans simply cannot accommodate. The city could grow and change as the community did, its form always reflecting its current function and values. This bottom-up approach fostered a powerful sense of ownership and social cohesion among the residents. Everyone had a stake in the city's success because everyone had a hand in its shape. The walls of Great Zimbabwe were not just barriers, they were the physical embodiment of a shared identity, built literally stone by stone through collective effort and mutual agreement. This model of inclusive, adaptive urban design stands as a timeless reminder that the most successful and enduring habitats are often those that are built not just for the people, but by them. This profound shift in how we design our world didn't happen overnight. It began gradually, a quiet revolution sparked in the studios of Renaissance artists and architects. The invention of linear perspective drawing in the 15th century was a monumental breakthrough for the first time. It was possible to create a two-dimensional image that accurately represented a three-dimensional space. This new ability to visually project a building onto paper was intoxicating. It promised clarity, control, and a way to communicate a design vision without the builder needing to stand at your elbow. Soon, these artistic techniques evolved into precise technical drawings, the direct ancestors of the modern blueprint. This was the birth of a new language of design, one that was visual, standardized, and could be shipped across continents. The advantages were undeniable and transformative. Blueprints allowed for an unprecedented level of precision and replication. A complex design for a new type of arch or a mechanical invention could be drawn in Florence and then sent to Paris or London, where local craftsmen could attempt to recreate it with a high degree of fidelity. This accelerated the exchange of ideas and the pace of innovation on a continental scale. Large-scale projects, especially those funded by distant patrons or governments, could now be managed more easily. A king could commission a palace from his capital city, and the plans could be sent to the site for execution, creating a clear, unchanging set of instructions that reduced the risk of miscommunication or deviation from the royal vision. This new system prized uniformity, predictability, and efficiency above all else, but this incredible gain came with a profound and often unacknowledged loss. As the authority of the drawn plan grew, the authority of the master builder on the ground diminished. The nuanced, intuitive knowledge that was once passed down through generations of apprentices, the feel of a particular quarry's stone, the way the wind funnels through a specific valley in winter, the local recipe for a lime mortar that works best in the humid climate began to be sidelined. This knowledge was difficult to capture on a blueprint. It was considered informal, anecdotal, even old-fashioned. The designer, now often separated from the physical site by distance and social class, became the sole author. The builder was reduced to a technician, tasked with executing a vision he had no part in creating. This separation between design and execution sometimes led to spectacular failures that a local master would have foreseen. There are accounts of magnificent Renaissance palaces, perfectly drafted on vellum, that developed chronic dampness or structural cracks because the architect, working from a distant city, failed to account for the site's specific water table or soil composition. The blueprint dictated a universal solution, but the local environment demanded a unique, adaptive response. The living library of skills, the tactile wisdom held in the hands of the stonemasons, carpenters, and smiths, was no longer consulted as the final word. It was a trade-off. The brilliant, replicable idea from afar sometimes triumphed over the deeply contextual, place-based wisdom right there on the ground. This transition also reshaped the very identity of engineering. The profession moved from being a craft, learned through long apprenticeship and lived experience, toward a science, learned through formal education and theoretical principles. The why of a design decision was increasingly found in mathematical calculations on paper, not in the stories of elders or the embodied knowledge of a craft. This was not inherently wrong. It gave us stronger bridges and taller buildings, but it meant that a whole dimension of human understanding, one that was holistic, adaptive, and deeply connected to place, began to fade from our collective memory. The forgotten engineers and their intuitive methods serve as a crucial reminder that progress is not a simple, linear path. Every technological advancement involves a choice, and with every choice, something is gained and something else of equal value is often left behind. Today, a quiet revolution is unfolding on drawing boards and construction sites around the world, as architects and urban planners increasingly turn their gaze backward to move forward. Faced with the immense challenges of climate change, resource scarcity, and the often soul-crushing uniformity of modern cities, there is a powerful and growing movement to rediscover and integrate the ancient engineering principles we've been exploring. This isn't about nostalgia or a rejection of technology. It's a pragmatic search for sustainable, resilient, and deeply human-centric design solutions that our ancestors mastered centuries ago. The goal is a powerful fusion marrying the intuitive wisdom of the past with the analytical power and materials of the present to create a built environment that is both profoundly innovative and timelessly grounded. We see this most vividly in the realm of climate-responsive architecture. In the scorching deserts of the Middle East, the ancient Persian technology of the windcatcher or badger is being studied and adapted for modern buildings. These ingenious towers, which function without any mechanical power, capture cool breezes from high above the ground and funnel them down into interior spaces, while simultaneously drawing warm air up and out. It's a perfectly passive air conditioning system, developed over millennia of observation. Contemporary architects are now incorporating updated versions of these windcatchers into new structures, drastically reducing the need for energy-intensive electrical cooling. Similarly, the thick, thermally massive adobe walls common in vernacular buildings from the American Southwest to North Africa are being re-evaluated. These walls absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night, naturally regulating indoor temperatures in a way that modern lightweight construction simply cannot match. By applying modern material science to these ancient concepts, we can enhance their durability and performance without losing their inherent efficiency. Perhaps one of the most urgent applications of this old-new wisdom is in designing for seismic resilience. As we saw with Machu Picchu, Incan stonemasons developed a technique of fitting polygonal stones together so precisely that the walls could sway and settle during an earthquake without collapsing. This dry stone masonry, known as ashlar, is a masterpiece of flexible design. Modern engineers are now studying these interlocking shapes and the principle of flexibility they embody. The goal isn't to abandon steel and concrete, but to learn from these ancient examples to design modern joints and reinforcements that allow buildings to dissipate seismic energy rather than rigidly resist it until they fracture. This biomimicry of ancient design is leading to breakthroughs in creating structures that can literally dance with an earthquake and remain standing. This movement is also breathing new life into ancient water management strategies. In places like Rajasthan, India, communities are reviving the centuries-old practice of building johad simple, crescent-shaped earthen dams that capture and hold rainwater, allowing it to percolate and recharge the groundwater table instead of just running off. This simple, low-tech solution is reversing desertification and restoring water security in a way that massive, costly concrete dam projects often fail to achieve. Likewise, the Karnak systems of Persia, which are underground channels that tap into aquifers at the base of mountains and transport water for miles using only gravity, are being re-recognized for their incredible efficiency in reducing evaporation loss in arid regions. This isn't just about copying old techniques, it's about understanding the underlying philosophy. The forgotten engineers worked with nature as a partner, not an adversary. They valued adaptation over imposition and context over standardization. By embracing this mindset, today's designers can create cities that are not only more sustainable and efficient but also more beautiful, comfortable, and meaningful to the people who inhabit them. We are learning that the most advanced solution is sometimes not a brighter LED or a smarter algorithm, but a smarter relationship with the sun, the wind, the water, and the earth itself. A relationship that these intuitive builders understood on a cellular level. This rediscovery is the highest form of respect we can pay to their legacy, applying their timeless intelligence to build a better, more resilient future. Beyond mere bricks and mortar, the ancient builders infused their work with a profound sense of purpose, embedding the very soul of their culture and its deepest ethical values into the layout of their cities. This wasn't an afterthought or a decorative flourish, it was the foundational principle of their design philosophy. Every street width, every courtyard enclosure, and the placement of every window was a conscious choice made to nurture a specific way of life, to promote community well-being, and to reinforce a shared cultural identity. The city itself became a physical teacher, its design silently guiding inhabitants toward behaviors that were considered virtuous, harmonious, and spiritually aligned. Consider the traditional Islamic city, a masterpiece of environmental and social ethics made manifest in urban form. The hot, arid climate demanded a response, but the solution was not purely technical, it was deeply cultural. The intricate, narrow, and often labyrinthine streets weren't just for shade. They were designed to create a sense of privacy and modesty, values central to the community. High walls shielded interior family life from public view, while ornately latticed windows, known as mashrabiyah, allowed women to observe the bustling street below without being seen, perfectly balancing the need for light, air, and social seclusion. The city's layout was a direct physical expression of a core ethical principle, the sanctity of private life and the importance of creating a buffer between the public sphere and the intimate world of the home. Water, a sacred and scarce resource in these regions, was managed with a reverence that went far beyond simple engineering. The public fountain, or sabil, was never placed merely for convenience. Its location was a deliberate act of civic charity. Positioned at a crossroads or near a mosque, it offered refreshment to all rich and poor, resident and traveler alike. The system of water channels that fed it was a marvel of conservation, often covered to prevent evaporation and contamination, reflecting a deep ethical duty to steward a precious gift. The entire urban fabric was woven with this mindfulness, creating a cool, quiet, and respectful environment that catered to human dignity and spiritual contemplation, not just physical necessity. Contrast this with a common pitfall of modern urban planning, where the driving force is often economic efficiency and rapid scalability. The result can be a stark landscape of identical concrete towers, wide asphalt roads prioritizing cars over people, and vast, unshaded plazas that feel inhospitable. This approach, while sometimes effective for housing large numbers of people quickly, often overlooks the human need for intimacy, variety, and a sense of belonging. The design choices silently teach a different lesson, that speed and cost are more important than community, and that uniformity is preferable to character. The city becomes a machine for living rather than a home for living well. Reconnecting with these ancient ethical dimensions offers a powerful corrective, a blueprint for infusing compassion and inclusivity back into our built environment. It challenges us to ask different questions at the start of a project. Not just how many units can we fit on this plot, but how will this design make people feel? Does it foster chance encounters between neighbors? Does it provide solace and quiet for the elderly? Does it offer safe, shaded spaces for children to play? It encourages planners to consult not just with economists and traffic engineers, but with sociologists, community elders, and the residents themselves, weaving their stories and needs directly into the design. This isn't about recreating the past or adopting a specific architectural style. It's about embracing the underlying intention that our cities should actively promote human flourishing. It means designing neighborhoods that naturally encourage walking and social interaction, not just driving. It means prioritizing green spaces and public water features that provide psychological relief and cool the air. It means ensuring that new developments include a mix of incomes and ages to prevent social isolation. By looking back to these forgotten engineers, we can find a way forward to create urban spaces that are not only more sustainable and efficient, but also more joyful, more compassionate, and truly worthy of the diverse and vibrant communities they are built to serve. While master builders were deeply attuned to their local environments, their genius was never confined by geography. Some of history's most breathtaking urban designs emerged not from isolation, but from vibrant, cross-cultural conversations that spanned continents. The flow of people, goods, and ideas along ancient trade routes acted as a vast, informal university of engineering, where knowledge was the most precious commodity of all. A master mason in Persia might never meet his counterpart in Byzantium, but their techniques could still mingle and evolve through the stories of traveling merchants, the movements of skilled artisans, and the shared challenges of building for new empires. This global exchange of ideas created a rich tapestry of hybrid architectural styles, each one a unique fusion of foreign inspiration and local ingenuity, proving that the most resilient designs are often those born of diversity. The Silk Road stands as the ultimate testament to this phenomenon. This sprawling network of routes was far more than a path for silk and spices. It was a living conduit for the world's architectural wisdom. Consider the magnificent city of Samarkand, a jewel of the Timurid Empire. Its iconic turquoise-domed mosques and madrasas are instantly recognizable, but their design is a breathtaking synthesis of influences gathered from across Asia. The techniques for firing the brilliant glazed tiles that shimmer in the sun were likely refined from Chinese ceramic knowledge, carried westward by traders. The monumental scale of the arches and the complex geometric patterning speak to a deep understanding of Persian engineering and mathematical artistry. Yet, these foreign ideas were not simply copied. They were adapted to local materials, the specific clays of the region, the sun-baked bricks, and to the cultural context of Central Asia, resulting in a style that was entirely new and distinctly Samarkandi. The city became a living museum of global innovation, its skyline a dialogue between East and West. This process of adaptation was the key to its success. A blueprint for a Persian dome, if one had even existed, would have been useless if followed rigidly in a different climate with different resources. Instead, the transfer of knowledge was about principles, not prescriptions. A builder might hear a description of a Roman arch or see a sketch of an Indian stepwell and understand the underlying structural concept, the way it distributed weight or managed water flow. He would then reinterpret that concept using the stone from his own quarry and the labor practices of his own community. This is how the squinch arch, a clever method for transitioning from a square room to a circular dome, likely traveled from ancient Persia to become a foundational element of Byzantine and later Islamic architecture. Each culture adopted the idea and made it their own, refining it for their own aesthetic and structural needs without any need for standardized technical drawings. The result was a world of profoundly context-specific innovation. In Constantinople, the awe-inspiring Hagia Sophia represents perhaps the most ambitious fusion of engineering traditions in history. Its unprecedented massive dome was the work of two mathematicians, Isidore of Miletus and Anthemius of Tralles, who drew upon a vast reservoir of knowledge from across the Roman Empire and beyond. They incorporated Roman expertise in concrete and monumental scale, Persian understanding of vaulting and arches, and even insights from Eastern geometry. This collaborative, international effort produced a structure that seemed to defy physics, a dome that appeared to float on a halo of light. It was a monument that could never have been conceived in a vacuum, a direct product of the cross-pollination facilitated by trade and cultural exchange. This historical model offers a powerful lesson for our interconnected modern world. The ancient exchange of ideas was slow, deliberate, and deeply respectful of local conditions. It was about sharing wisdom, not imposing a single, universal standard. A technique was only considered successful if it could be translated and made to work with local materials and local skills. This stands in stark contrast to some modern tendencies towards homogenization, where identical glass and steel towers can be found in every global city, often with little regard for the local climate or culture. The forgotten engineers of the trade routes teach us that true innovation doesn't come from simply copying and pasting a design from one place to another. It comes from a respectful dialogue, a meeting of minds across cultures that sparks something entirely new, sustainable, and beautifully adapted to its place in the world. When we picture the master builders of the ancient world, our minds often conjure images of men surveying sites or carving stone. But this historical snapshot is incomplete, missing a vital group of contributors whose influence was woven into the very fabric of daily life: women. Their role in intuitive engineering and city building has been profoundly overlooked, not because their contributions were minor, but because their work was often seamlessly integrated into the domestic and agricultural spheres, making it invisible to traditional historical narratives focused on monumental architecture. In countless indigenous and traditional societies, women were the primary engineers of the home environment, the managers of water resources, and the innovators of agricultural landscapes. Their deep, practical knowledge of daily needs, natural materials, and seasonal cycles made them indispensable architects of comfort, sustainability, and community resilience. This expertise stemmed from a lifetime of intimate observation and hands-on experience. As the primary gatherers of water, food, and fuel, women developed an unparalleled understanding of local hydrology, botany, and geology. They knew which springs ran true in a drought, which types of clay were best for sealing a storage pit, and how to position a dwelling to capture the morning sun but block the prevailing winter winds. This knowledge was then applied to create highly functional and adaptive designs. In the Anatolian region, for example, archaeological evidence and ethnographic studies suggest women were central to constructing homes that utilized massive earthen walls for thermal mass. These walls, often made from locally sourced mud brick or rammed earth, would absorb heat during the day and slowly release it through the cool night, creating a stable, comfortable indoor climate without any need for mechanical heating or cooling. This wasn't a grand architectural theory. It was applied physics, born from the necessity of keeping a family warm and safe. The influence of this female perspective extended far beyond single dwellings to shape entire communities. In many parts of ancient Africa and the Americas, women were the driving force behind the design and management of agricultural terraces. These were not simple garden walls. They were complex feats of landscape engineering designed to prevent soil erosion on hillsides, conserve precious water, and maximize arable land. The specific contour of each terrace, the selection of stones for retaining walls, and the integration of drainage channels were all decisions informed by generations of women's knowledge passed from mother to daughter. This ensured food security and allowed societies to flourish in challenging environments. Similarly, in the American Southwest, Pueblo women were renowned for their skill as builders, meticulously plastering interior walls with layers of clay to create smooth, insulated, and aesthetically pleasing surfaces that regulated humidity and temperature. Their work directly contributed to the health and durability of their multi-story adobe communities. This focus on practicality, comfort, and family well-being meant that designs emerging from women's input were inherently human-centric. While a male architect or ruler might be concerned with monumental scale or imposing facades, women's engineering priorities were often oriented toward efficiency, safety, and nurturing daily life. A water source would be placed not just for strategic access, but along a safe and shaded path for children. A courtyard would be sized and oriented for communal cooking and social gathering. Storage areas would be designed to keep food safe from pests and spoilage. This emphasis on the granular details of living created cities that were not only structurally sound but also deeply livable, fostering social cohesion and well-being from the ground up. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the most successful and enduring engineering isn't always about the grandest gesture. Often, it's about 1,000 thoughtful, small solutions that together create a resilient and nurturing home. There's a feeling you get when walking through the narrow, winding lanes of an old European town or finding a quiet seat in a sun-dappled Spanish courtyard, a sense of calm, of belonging, of being in a place that feels right on a deeply human level. This isn't a coincidence or mere nostalgia. It's the direct psychological impact of intuitive design. These spaces weren't created from a detached architect's abstract plan, but were shaped incrementally by generations of people responding to human needs, social patterns, and the simple desire for beauty and comfort. The result is an environment that feels less like a machine for living and more like an extension of ourselves, a landscape that actively supports our mental and emotional well-being in ways we are only beginning to fully understand through modern science. Consider the difference between a wide, straight modern boulevard and a meandering medieval street. The boulevard is designed for efficiency, for moving the maximum number of cars as quickly as possible. It's a landscape of scale and speed, which can be exhilarating but also psychologically draining, filled with visual noise, constant movement, and a lack of definable human detail. Now step into a medieval lane. The winding path naturally slows you down, creating a sense of discovery around every gentle curve. The irregular building facades, each one unique, give your eyes a place to rest and explore. The scale is intimate. The buildings are rarely more than a few stories high, creating a sense of enclosure and safety rather than imposing monumentality. This isn't just charming, it's cognitively restorative. The reduced scale and complexity lower sensory overload, allowing our minds to relax instead of constantly processing a barrage of stimuli. These streets weren't designed with psychological theory in mind, but they were designed by people for people, and that inherent humanity is what makes them so comforting. This nurturing quality extends to the social fabric these spaces weave. The shaded courtyards found across Andalusia or the Middle East aren't just architectural features, they are social engines. By creating semi-private, protected spaces that are open to the sky, they foster chance encounters, quiet conversations, and community observation. A bench in a courtyard invites you to sit and stay a while, to watch children play or to talk with a neighbor. This stands in stark contrast to the isolating design of many modern apartment complexes, where the only semi-public space might be a barren parking lot or a rarely used grassy median. The intuitive design of these older spaces understands that community isn't an abstract concept. It's built through countless small, unplanned interactions. By facilitating these micro-interactions, the design actively combats loneliness and fosters a stronger, more interconnected social web, which is a fundamental pillar of mental health. Modern environmental psychology provides a robust scientific framework for what we intuitively feel in these spaces. Research into concepts like prospect refuge theory explains why we find certain environments pleasurable. We prefer spaces that offer a sense of outlook or prospect over a scene, combined with a sense of security or refuge at our backs. A window seat in a cafe on a small square perfectly fulfills this. You can observe the life of the square prospect from a secure, enclosed position refuge. Similarly, studies on biophilia confirm that we have an innate affinity for natural elements, and intuitive designs almost always incorporate them seamlessly, whether through internal courtyards filled with plants, the use of natural materials like wood and stone, or the simple sound of water from a fountain. These elements lower stress, improve concentration, and enhance our overall mood. The lesson here is profound for our modern world. In our pursuit of efficiency, standardization, and cost-effectiveness, we have often created urban environments that can feel alienating, stressful, and psychologically barren. The endless repetition of identical housing blocks, the vast, empty plazas that are too windy in winter and too hot in summer, the car-centric streets that are hostile to pedestrians, these are the consequences of a design process that has prioritized abstract metrics over lived human experience. By looking back to the intuitive builders, we aren't advocating for a return to the past, but for a reintroduction of its core wisdom, that the ultimate purpose of design is to serve human well-being. It's a call to design with empathy, to create spaces that aren't just visually impressive from a distance, but are truly nurturing to the human spirit at ground level every single day. What's perhaps most staggering about these ancient urban centers is not just that they lasted, but how they lasted thriving for centuries, even millennia, within the strict ecological boundaries of their local environments. They achieved a level of sustainability that our modern cities, for all their technology, are still struggling to emulate. This wasn't a matter of luck or low population. It was the direct result of a design philosophy that viewed resources not as something to be consumed and discarded, but as precious elements in a continuous circular loop. Every material had a purpose, every waste product had a potential use, and every drop of water was honored as the source of life itself. This deep-rooted ethos of efficiency and respect created urban ecosystems that were inherently sustainable long before the term entered our modern lexicon. Nowhere is this circular thinking more beautifully illustrated than in the magnificent stepwells of India, known as bayolis or valves. These were far more than just wells. They were intricate underground water temples, feats of civic engineering, and social hubs all rolled into one. Built primarily in arid regions of Gujarat and Rajasthan, their design was a masterclass in multi-functionality. As you descend the symmetrical, ornate steps deep into the earth, the air becomes noticeably cooler, a natural and powerful form of air conditioning that provided respite from the blistering heat for entire communities. But the engineering genius goes much deeper. The structure itself was designed to capture and store every possible drop of monsoon rainwater in a vast underground reservoir. Crucially, the steps and the porous materials of the construction allowed water to slowly percolate through the soil, actively recharging the groundwater table instead of just holding it in a sealed tank. This single structure solved multiple problems at once. It provided year-round water security, offered a cool public space for gathering, and managed the local aquifer sustainably, all without using a single watt of energy. It was a perfectly closed-loop system where the input rainwater was managed to benefit the environment even as it was being used. This principle of using local materials was another cornerstone of their sustainable success. It seems almost too simple, but its impact was profound. Builders used stone from a nearby quarry, clay from a local riverbank, and timber from surrounding forests. This drastically reduced the enormous embodied energy costs we associate with modern construction. The fuel needed to transport materials across continents, the industrial processing, the packaging. A building made from local sandstone and mud brick wasn't just cheaper, it was inherently low carbon. Furthermore, these materials were perfectly adapted to the local climate. Thick adobe walls in the Middle East provided superb thermal mass, keeping interiors cool by day and warm by night. In Southeast Asia, structures built on stilts from local hardwoods allowed air to circulate underneath and provided resilience against seasonal flooding. When a building made from these materials eventually reached the end of its life, it could simply return to the earth without leaving behind piles of toxic, non-biodegradable waste. This wasn't just recycling, it was a fundamental understanding of biodegradability and a respectful return of resources to the ecosystem. Underpinning all these practices was a cultural wisdom that treated sustainability not as a special policy, but as a non-negotiable way of life. This knowledge was often encoded in religious practices, folklore, and community rules. There were sacred groves where trees could not be cut, ensuring the protection of watersheds. There were festivals dedicated to cleaning water channels before the monsoons arrived. The placement of a well or the design of a house was governed by traditions that, while sometimes wrapped in spiritual belief, were based on generations of observed environmental science. These cultural codes acted as a powerful, internalized regulatory system that ensured resources were not exploited beyond their capacity to regenerate. The community understood itself as a steward of the land for future generations, not its owner. In our current era of climate crisis and rampant resource consumption, these ancient strategies are not just historical curiosities, they are urgently relevant blueprints. The stepwell teaches us about integrated water management and passive cooling. The use of local materials points the way to radically reducing the construction industry's massive carbon footprint. The cultural reverence for natural cycles offers a model for shifting our entire mindset from one of extraction to one of regeneration. These forgotten engineers were the original pioneers of the circular economy, demonstrating that true sustainability isn't about adding more technology, but about designing smarter systems from the very beginning, systems that work in harmony with nature's own flawless and efficient loops. This very absence of formal documentation is one of the primary reasons these master builders have faded from our collective memory. Their expertise was what we now call tacit knowledge, a deep, practical understanding that was embedded not in scrolls or ledgers, but in the very muscles, instincts, and lived experiences of the craftspeople themselves. It was the subtle know-how of how to judge the perfect consistency of lime mortar by its feel and smell, or the intuitive sense of which angle to cut a stone so it would lock perfectly into place under pressure. This kind of wisdom is incredibly difficult to capture in words. It's learned by doing, by watching, by making mistakes and correcting them under the guidance of a mentor. It resides in the hands of the potter, the eye of the carpenter, and the rhythmic hammer strikes of the blacksmith. Because it was never written down, this vast library of engineering intelligence remained largely invisible, passed from one generation to the next through a fragile chain of demonstration and practice. A chain that could be easily broken by war, famine, or simply the passage of time. This presents an enormous challenge for historians and archaeologists trying to piece together the full picture of how these ancient wonders were truly conceived. Without a manual or a set of plans to consult, they are left to become detectives, reverse engineering the genius from the finished product. They meticulously measure the precise incline of a Roman aqueduct, analyzing the mortar samples to decipher its chemical composition, and run hydrological simulations to understand the flow rates. They study the tool marks left on stones to determine the type of chisel used and the technique of the worker who wielded it. It's a painstaking process of looking at the evidence and working backward, inferring the thought process and the methods from the magnificent results that have survived the centuries. This forensic approach can tell us what they did with astonishing accuracy, but it often leaves us guessing at the why, the nuanced decisions made in the moment based on an intuition that has long since vanished. To fill in these gaps, researchers increasingly turn to the study of living oral traditions, and the few remaining communities who still practice these ancient crafts. By observing a stonemason in Nepal who learned his art from his grandfather, or by listening to the songs and stories used by West African masons to remember complex geometric patterns, we get a fleeting glimpse into that world of invisible knowledge. These traditions are living museums, but they are also critically endangered. When the last practitioner of a specific roofing technique or a forgotten method of forging passes away, that unique chapter of human ingenuity can be lost forever. The race is on to document these living libraries before they close, using modern tools like video and motion capture to record the precise movements, pressures, and rhythms that define a master's work, attempting to make the tacit explicit. Despite these challenges, this ongoing detective work continues to yield breathtaking discoveries that force us to radically reconsider the capabilities of pre-industrial societies. The more we learn, the more we realize that the absence of a blueprint was not an absence of sophistication. In fact, it often indicates a level of complexity that we are only beginning to appreciate. We are constantly finding that what we once assumed were simple, brute force constructions are in fact elegantly complex systems. The true blueprint was not on parchment. It was a living, evolving body of knowledge carried in the minds and hands of a community, adaptable, responsive, and incredibly sophisticated. This invisible knowledge isn't a relic of a primitive past. It's a testament to a different, and in many ways profoundly advanced, way of thinking and creating, offering a rich and largely untapped resource for innovation in our own time. This seamless fusion of form and function is perhaps nowhere more visible than in the soaring Gothic cathedrals of medieval Europe. Those iconic gargoyles perched high on the ramparts are the perfect embodiment of this philosophy. To a modern eye, they are fantastical sculptures, grimacing demons and mythical beasts that capture the imagination. But their purpose was intensely practical. They were ingenious waterspouts designed to channel rainwater away from the delicate stonework of the walls and foundations, preventing erosion and structural damage. The craftsman who carved them wasn't just an artist or just an engineer, he was both. He had to understand hydraulics and trajectory to ensure the water was thrown clear of the building, while simultaneously possessing the artistic skill to transform a simple drain pipe into a storytelling masterpiece that conveyed religious messages to a largely illiterate populace. The entire cathedral stands as a testament to this union, where every rib vault was both a structural necessity and an aesthetic choice, creating those breathtaking, light-filled spaces that still inspire wonder centuries later. This holistic approach meant that beauty was never an afterthought or a superficial layer applied at the end. It was woven into the very DNA of the construction process. Consider the ancient stonemason carefully selecting a block of marble. He would assess its structural integrity, its grain, its load-bearing potential, the pure engineering calculus. But he would also note its color, its veining, how it would look when placed next to another stone. The pattern itself became part of the building's character. In places like the Alhambra Palace in Spain, the breathtakingly intricate mucanas, those honeycomb-like vaulting decorations, are a marvel of geometric engineering that distributes weight efficiently, while also creating a mesmerizing play of light and shadow that evokes the heavens. The mathematical precision required to create these patterns was immense, but the driving force was the desire to create an atmosphere of transcendent beauty. The art was the engineering, and the engineering was the art. This blurring of disciplinary lines created an environment ripe for incredible innovation. When the same mind is responsible for both the stability of a structure and its emotional impact, solutions emerge that would never occur in a more segmented process. The master builders of the past were polymaths. They were geologists who understood stone, mathematicians who calculated stress, artists who understood proportion and light, and psychologists who understood how space influences human emotion. This cross-pollination of skills led to breakthroughs. The flying buttress, for instance, was a brilliant structural solution to support taller walls and larger windows. But it was also sculpted into graceful, arching forms that became a defining aesthetic element of Gothic architecture. The solution was at once technically masterful and breathtakingly beautiful because the person designing it saw no distinction between the two goals. Reconnecting with this integrated mindset could profoundly enrich our contemporary built environment. So much of modern architecture and engineering has become siloed, with specialists working in separation. An engineer ensures the building stands up, an architect designs the form, and an interior decorator is brought in at the end to add beauty. The result can often feel disjointed, with buildings that are structurally sound but emotionally sterile, or aesthetically bold but functionally flawed. The lesson from these ancient builders is that the most uplifting and enduring human spaces emerge when technical prowess and artistic vision are partners from the very inception of a project. It's a call for a new generation of designers who are not afraid to blur the lines, to see a structural beam as a potential sculptural element, to treat a drainage system as an opportunity for artistic expression, and to remember that the ultimate goal of building is not just to shelter us but to inspire us. This inherent flexibility, born from centuries of on-the-ground experience rather than abstract calculation, gave intuitively designed cities a remarkable ability to withstand the very disasters that often devastate modern urban centers. When you build without a fixed, rigid plan, you're forced to incorporate a kind of organic redundancy and adaptability into every element of your design. These aren't fail-safes added as an afterthought. They are fundamental characteristics woven into the fabric of the structure itself, the result of generations of builders observing what actually works when nature unleashes its fury. This deep, place-based wisdom created a resilience that modern engineering, for all its computational power, is now scrambling to replicate. Consider the timeless elegance of traditional Japanese wooden architecture, particularly its legendary performance in earthquakes. For centuries, master carpenters developed a system of joinery so sophisticated that buildings could sway and dance with seismic waves rather than resist them to the point of fracture. The key lies in the intricate, interlocking wooden joints that connect posts and beams. These joints, with names like weri-kyugi and hozo sashi, are cut with astonishing precision to allow for a controlled amount of flex and movement. They act like the ligaments in a human body, allowing the structure to absorb and dissipate energy. Furthermore, the characteristically heavy, tiled roofs common in Japanese design play a surprising role. While it seems counterintuitive, this immense weight actually helps stabilize the building during a quake, acting like a pendulum that lowers the structure's center of gravity and dampens the violent shaking. This entire system was perfected through centuries of observation, trial, and error, a process of constant refinement after each tremor, with master builders noting which joints held and which designs collapsed. It was a living science written not in textbooks but in the surviving buildings themselves. This same principle of designing with natural forces, rather than against them, is brilliantly illustrated in vernacular architecture across the world's flood-prone regions. In the stilt houses found throughout Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, and the wetlands of South America, the solution to annual flooding wasn't to build stronger levees or higher concrete walls. It was to simply yield to the water, to literally rise above it. These raised foundations, often crafted from resilient local timber, emerged from the direct, repeated experience of communities living with monsoons and river overflows. The design is elegantly simple and profoundly effective. During a flood, the water flows freely underneath the living quarters, causing minimal damage to the structure and, crucially, allowing residents to remain safely in their homes. The space beneath often serves multiple purposes as a shaded workshop, a place for animals, or for storage, making intelligent use of the area that would otherwise be uninhabitable for part of the year. This is a form of resilience that accepts disaster as a periodic reality and adapts to it gracefully, rather than engaging in a costly and often futile battle to prevent it entirely. What's truly fascinating is how these intuitive designs often incorporate buffers and redundancies that a strict, efficiency-obsessed blueprint might eliminate to cut costs. A modern engineer working from calculations alone might specify the absolute minimum material strength required to meet a building code, but an intuitive builder drawing on generational knowledge understands that nature is unpredictable. They will naturally overbuild, adding extra layers of stone, using heartier timber, or incorporating design elements that provide a margin of safety far beyond the theoretical minimum. A medieval bridge might have a wider, more substantial foundation than strictly necessary, because the builders knew that river currents could unexpectedly scour away the riverbed. A traditional adobe house in the Middle East will have exceptionally thick walls, not just for coolness, but because that mass provides immense structural stability. These are the hidden buffers, the innate fail-safes that are born from a conservative respect for nature's power. In our current era of intensifying climate-related disasters, from superstorms to catastrophic flooding and more frequent seismic activity, this ancient wisdom is not a historical curiosity. It is an urgent and vital resource. The limitations of our rigid, blueprint-driven approach are becoming painfully clear. Neighborhoods built on filled wetlands that flood catastrophically, glass-skinned skyscrapers that overheat without massive air conditioning, and communities wiped out by wildfires because the landscaping and materials were never adapted to the local fire ecology. We are learning, sometimes the hard way, that a design that looks perfect on paper can fail spectacularly when confronted with the messy, dynamic complexity of the real world. The resilient strategies of the forgotten engineers offer a different path forward, one that prioritizes adaptation, respects local contexts, and builds in a capacity to bend without breaking. Their legacy teaches us that true resilience isn't about building stronger walls against the storm, but about learning how to dance in the rain. What's truly remarkable about these ancient building methods is how they achieved monumental results with what we would consider astonishing economic efficiency. Without the immense overhead costs of detailed planning departments, lengthy approval processes, and reams of technical documentation, societies could direct a far greater portion of their resources directly into the physical act of creation. This wasn't about cutting corners. It was about a streamlined, pragmatic approach where every decision was optimized for practicality and the judicious use of available materials and labor. The entire process was lean by necessity, eliminating the bureaucratic layers that often slow down and inflate the cost of modern construction. A cornerstone of this efficiency was the almost universal reliance on local materials. Builders didn't order granite from a continent away. They used the stone from the nearest quarry, the clay from the local riverbank, and the timber from the surrounding forests. This eliminated the colossal financial and environmental costs of long-distance transportation, which is a massive component of modern building budgets. But beyond just saving on shipping, using local materials meant the builders had an intimate, generational knowledge of how to work with them. They knew exactly how to cut the local sandstone, how to mix the local clay for the strongest bricks, and how to season the local hardwood to prevent warping. This deep familiarity drastically reduced waste and costly errors, as materials were used in ways that played to their inherent strengths. A structure built from the landscape itself also tended to blend into it harmoniously, requiring less artificial modification and maintenance over its long lifespan. The designs themselves were also born from a principle of speed and practicality. Without the luxury of endless revisions on paper, projects moved quickly from conception to construction. Solutions were often modular and repetitive, not out of a lack of creativity, but as a smart way to simplify the building process. Think of the Roman aqueducts. Once the perfect arch was perfected, it could be repeated endlessly by teams of workers, creating a rhythm and efficiency on the worksite that allowed them to span incredible distances in remarkably short timeframes. This focus on buildability meant that designs were inherently realistic and achievable with the tools and skills at hand, avoiding the modern pitfall of fantastical architectural designs that proved nightmarishly expensive and complex to actually build. Perhaps the most powerful economic engine, however, was the widespread use of communal labor. For many projects, especially those serving the entire community like a new town wall, a bridge, or a granary, the workforce wasn't a paid contractor but the people themselves. Traditions like the barn raising in colonial America are a perfect example. The entire community would come together, contributing their labor freely for the collective good. This system dramatically reduced the direct cash outlay for a project, transforming labor from a major budget line item into a social investment, but its benefits went far beyond economics. These communal efforts forged powerful social bonds, created a shared sense of ownership and pride in the new structure, and allowed skills to be passed informally among neighbors. The project itself became a community-building event, strengthening the social fabric as it raised the physical one. This potent combination of local sourcing, practical design, and communal effort is what enabled societies with limited technology and no formal economy to undertake some of the most ambitious construction projects in human history. The Great Wall of China, weaving across thousands of miles of mountainous terrain, was built over centuries by successive dynasties using local materials and vast armies of conscripted labor and soldiers. The massive moai statues of Easter Island were carved from volcanic tuff using stone tools, and then transported across the island using a combination of log rollers, ropes, and coordinated human power, a staggering feat of logistics managed without a single invoice or blueprint. These weren't projects funded by bottomless treasuries. They were testaments to what a society can achieve when it intelligently mobilizes its greatest resources, its people, its knowledge of the land, and its shared purpose. This isn't to say we should discard the crucial safety standards and regulations that protect us today. The lessons aren't about returning to a past without building codes, but about recognizing where our modern processes have become bloated and disconnected from practical, on-the-ground reality. There is a powerful lesson in the ancient builders' ability to make swift, adaptive decisions without being hamstrung by layers of administrative red tape. It invites us to ask how we might streamline approvals, empower local craftspeople, and rediscover the value of community involvement in shaping our environment. By blending the safety and precision of modern engineering with the lean, adaptive, and socially cohesive spirit of the past, we might just find a way to build not only more efficiently, but with greater meaning and connection. For these master builders, the act of construction was never a mere technical challenge to be conquered. It was a profound philosophical and spiritual practice, a way of aligning human ambition with the deeper rhythms of the natural world. Their blueprint-free approach was born from a foundational belief system that saw humanity not as separate from nature, but as an integral, humble participant within a vast, interconnected whole. This worldview stands in stark contrast to the more dominant modern perspective that often frames engineering as a battle against natural forces, a struggle to impose human will and order upon a chaotic environment. The ancient engineer began with a question of ethics and meaning, not just how can we build this, but how should we build this in a way that honors the land and nurtures the spirit. We can see this philosophy expressed with breathtaking beauty in the tradition of the Chinese garden city, a concept deeply infused with Taoist and Buddhist thought. These were not cities in the conventional sense, with rigid grids and imposing monuments, but rather carefully curated landscapes that sought to recreate the essence of the natural world in miniature. The core principle was to emulate the effortless action of nature itself, what Taoism calls wu-wei, not inaction, but action that is so perfectly in accord with the flow of nature that it appears effortless. A stream was not diverted with a harsh, straight canal. It was gently guided to meander through the city, its banks softened with native plants and crossed by gracefully arched bridges. Pavilions and homes were not placed to dominate a vista, but to nestle into it, offering framed views of a specific rock formation or a carefully composed glimpse of the moon reflected on water. Every element was designed to evoke a sense of serene contemplation and remind inhabitants of their place within a larger, harmonious order. The city became a living meditation, a daily practice in perceiving beauty and finding balance. This ethos of reciprocity, rather than control, is a cornerstone of countless indigenous worldviews that guided settlement patterns for millennia. Where a modern developer might see a forest as a blank slate to be cleared, an indigenous planner would see a complex community of beings, trees, animals, spirits, with which they must enter into a respectful relationship. The design of a village would therefore emerge from a process of deep listening and observation. The location for a new longhouse might be chosen not for its proximity to a road, but for its alignment with seasonal sun paths for warmth, its protection from prevailing winds, or its access to a reliable, clean water source understood as a living relative. The Haudenosaunee philosophy of considering the impact of every decision on the next 7 generations is perhaps the ultimate expression of this long-term, custodial mindset. It forces a consideration of sustainability and consequences that is utterly absent from short-term economic calculations, ensuring that the design of a community actively nourishes the land that will nourish its descendants. These philosophical stances directly translated into the tangible, sustainable outcomes we've been exploring. A belief in harmony with nature naturally leads to designs that work with the topography, use local materials, and manage resources in a circular flow. A sense of humility prevents the hubris of believing you can completely control a river with concrete banks, leading instead to the adaptive resilience of building on stilts in a floodplain. The spiritual significance of a mountain or a grove ensures its preservation, protecting watersheds and biodiversity as a sacred duty rather than an environmental regulation. The city, in this view, becomes an extension of a cultural and spiritual identity, a physical prayer for balance and well-being that is lived in every day. Reconnecting with these foundational beliefs today offers a desperately needed ethical compass for our own urban futures. Our current planning paradigms are still largely dominated by a philosophy of extraction and efficiency, prioritizing economic growth and rapid development above all else. The result is often a landscape of environmental degradation and social isolation. By looking back to these ancient engineers, we are not being nostalgic. we are rediscovering a more mature and responsible way of inhabiting the Earth. It invites us to ask different, more profound questions before we break ground. Does this design foster a connection to nature? Does it promote community and well-being? Does it leave the land healthier than we found it? This shift from a mindset of exploitation to one of reciprocity could inspire a new era of urban planning, one that builds cities not just for profit, but for people and the planet, creating spaces that are not only functional, but are also spiritually nourishing and ethically sound. Imagine the scene, not with the roar of heavy machinery, but with the quiet hum of focused intention. Before a single stone was laid for an Egyptian temple, the priests and architects would gather under the vast, star-drenched sky. Their tools were not drafting tables, but sighting rods and a deep knowledge of the heavens. They waited for a specific, sacred moment, often during a religious festival, when a key star like Sirius would align perfectly with a notch on the horizon. This celestial event didn't just mark a direction, it consecrated it. The entire foundation of the temple would be oriented to this astronomical marker, physically anchoring the house of the gods to the eternal cycles of the cosmos. This was far more than a surveying technique. It was a profound ritual that transformed a construction project from a mundane task into a collaborative act with the divine. This practice of embedding ceremony into construction was a global phenomenon, a vital thread woven into the fabric of ancient city building. From the cornerstone laying ceremonies in medieval Europe, where coins and relics were sealed beneath the first stone to attract blessings and prosperity, to the Vedic rituals in ancient India that involved chanting specific hymns to purify a building site and honor the spirit of the land, these acts served a crucial dual purpose. On one level, they were a form of spiritual technology, a way to align human ambition with perceived cosmic forces, seeking protection and harmony for the structure and its future inhabitants. But on a more immediate human level, these rituals were powerful social glue. They fostered a profound sense of shared purpose and unity among the diverse group of laborers, artisans, and patrons involved in a project. A communal blessing or a shared moment of astronomical observation reminded everyone that they were part of something larger than themselves, a collective endeavor that transcended individual labor and carried deep cultural significance. The meticulous orientation of Egyptian temples to the stars is perhaps the most iconic example, but this principle of sacred alignment extended to far more than just astronomy. In many cultures, the very process of selecting materials was ritualized. A master builder might offer a prayer or a small offering before felling a great tree for a central beam, acknowledging the life given for the project. The act of mixing the first batch of mortar might be accompanied by chants or the inclusion of symbolic herbs. Every step was infused with intentionality, ensuring that the spirit of the work was considered as carefully as the physical structure. This holistic approach blurred the line between the technical and the spiritual, creating buildings that were not only structurally sound, but were also believed to be spiritually alive and aligned with the natural and supernatural worlds. In our modern era, the discipline of engineering has largely been secularized, and for good reason. It has given us standardized safety, replicable results, and a language of efficiency that allows for global collaboration. We rely on GPS for alignment, not the Star of Isis. We conduct soil tests, not land-worshipping ceremonies. This shift has undeniably brought immense progress. However, in this transition, we may have lost something intangible but invaluable: the sense of sacred purpose and mindful connection that these rituals provided. The modern construction site can often feel disconnected, a place where workers execute plans made by distant architects with little understanding of the overall vision or emotional connection to the final space. What if we sought to reintroduce a modern form of this ceremonial intentionality? This isn't a call to return to ancient religious practices, but rather to embrace the underlying principle that mindfulness and a sense of shared purpose enhance the quality and meaning of our built environment. We could see this in simple acts, holding a project-wide meeting at the start of construction where the architects and engineers share the core vision and environmental goals with everyone involved, from the project manager to the apprentices. It could involve a moment of collective reflection before pouring the foundation, not to ask for divine blessing, but to reaffirm a commitment to safety, sustainability, and creating a space that will genuinely serve its community. Incorporating biophilic design principles that reconnect inhabitants with nature is itself a form of modern reverence for the natural world. By consciously creating moments that foster unity, purpose, and a respect for the impact of our buildings, we can construct spaces that are not only efficient and sturdy, but also feel inherently right, fostering well-being and a deep sense of place for generations to come. Yet the true legacy of these forgotten engineers is far greater than any single material or technique. It's a foundational philosophy that continues to shape the very bones of our modern world, often in ways we scarcely notice. Consider the humble road you drive on. The basic principles of its construction, a layered system for stability and drainage, crowned in the center to shed water, were perfected by Roman engineers 2,000 years ago. Their vast network of roads, built to move legions with astonishing speed, established a template for connectivity and durability that remains the global standard for highway engineering today. Or look up at the complex overpasses and aqueducts near you. The arch, a Roman innovation that redistributes weight with breathtaking efficiency, is the silent, enduring reason so many of our bridges and viaducts still stand. These aren't just historical curiosities, they are active, load-bearing components of our 21st century infrastructure, a daily testament to an engineering wisdom so profound that we've seen no need to fundamentally improve upon it. Perhaps the most exciting modern application of this ancient knowledge lies in the urgent search for sustainable materials, and here, Roman concrete is having a spectacular renaissance. For decades, scientists were baffled by a particular mystery. Why do 2,000-year-old Roman piers, constantly battered by saltwater in Mediterranean harbors, not only remain intact but actually grow stronger over time, while our modern concrete deteriorates in mere decades? The answer, discovered through advanced microscopy, was a revolutionary ingredient: volcanic ash. The Romans mixed this ash, specifically from the Pozzuoli region, with lime and seawater to create a compound that undergoes a remarkable long-term chemical reaction. When tiny cracks form and seawater seeps in, it reacts with the volcanic material to form new, crystalline structures that literally fill the cracks and heal the damage. This self-healing capability is the holy grail of modern material science. Today, research teams around the world are racing to develop new, bio-inspired concrete mixes that incorporate similar principles, aiming to create infrastructure that can repair its own wear and tear, drastically reducing maintenance costs and extending the lifespan of everything from bridges to skyscrapers. We are, in effect, relearning a 2-millennia-old recipe to build a more resilient future. This debt to ancient ingenuity extends deep beneath our feet into the critical systems that manage our most precious resource, water. In the arid landscapes of ancient Persia, engineers developed the Karnak, a breathtakingly simple yet effective system of underground tunnels that gently slope from a water-bearing aquifer in the foothills down to arid plains and settlements. By being entirely underground, the Karnak eliminated almost all evaporation loss, a major problem for open canals in hot climates, and provided a clean, reliable water supply that could support agriculture and large cities in the middle of deserts. The principles of the Karnak passive gravity-fed water harvesting with minimal loss are now being studied by water-stressed regions around the world. Modern water mining projects and managed aquifer recharge techniques are direct descendants of this ancient technology, proving that the most sophisticated solution to a drying climate might not be energy-intensive desalination plants, but a smarter, more respectful approach to working with the natural hydrology of a place, just as the Persians did. Acknowledging this deep and ongoing debt does more than just give credit where it's long overdue. It fundamentally shifts our modern approach to innovation. It encourages a posture of humility and interdisciplinary curiosity, reminding us that breakthrough ideas are not always found in the newest laboratory, but can be waiting in the ruins of an ancient city or the pages of a long-forgotten text. It pushes engineers to collaborate not just with other scientists, but with historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists, creating a richer, more holistic dialogue about problem solving. This perspective teaches us that progress isn't always a linear path of replacing the old with the new. Sometimes it is a circular return, a process of rediscovering lost wisdom and integrating it with cutting-edge technology. The names of the individual master masons who mixed the Roman concrete or the Persian engineers who plotted the first Karnaks are lost to history, but their intellectual fingerprints are everywhere we look. They continue to be our silent partners in building a world that is durable, sustainable, and profoundly connected to the lessons of the past. It might seem like a paradox, but the most cutting-edge frontier of design and engineering is actively seeking to recapture the spirit of a 2,000-year-old way of thinking. We are on the cusp of a new era, one where the most advanced digital tools we possess are being trained not just to follow rigid, pre-programmed rules, but to think more like those ancient master builders intuitively, adaptively, and in deep conversation with the environment. This isn't about replacing human creativity with artificial intelligence. It's about forging a powerful new partnership, using technology to amplify our innate ability to create spaces that are both breathtakingly efficient and profoundly human. This revolution is powered by a suite of technologies with futuristic names: generative design, parametric modeling, and artificial intelligence, but their core principle is beautifully ancient. Imagine an architect who needs to design a support structure for a new building. Instead of drawing a single, best-guess blueprint, she inputs the essential parameters into a generative design program. The points where the structure must connect, the weight it needs to bear, the materials available, and even environmental factors like prevailing wind patterns or seismic loads. The software then doesn't just produce one solution. It uses algorithms to explore thousands, even millions of potential design options, each one perfectly optimized for the given constraints. The results are often astonishingly organic forms that look like they were grown rather than drawn, intricate, bone-like lattices that use the absolute minimum material to achieve maximum strength, or fluid, branching structures that perfectly channel load. This process echoes the ancient way of working, where the final form emerged from a responsive dialogue with the forces and materials at hand, rather than being imposed from a predetermined plan. This digital approach brings a new kind of flexibility that even the most skilled ancient builder could only dream of. Parametric modeling takes this a step further by creating a dynamic, interconnected digital model. In a parametric model, every element is linked by a set of rules and relationships. If you decide to change one parameter, say, increasing the height of a building, the software automatically adjusts everything else that is affected: the angle of the sun shading, the load on the foundation, the flow of people through the lobby. This allows for real-time, holistic adaptation that is the digital equivalent of a master mason walking the site and making intuitive adjustments as the quarry delivers a slightly different type of stone. It enables a level of customization and context-specific design at a scale that was previously impossible, allowing us to create buildings and urban spaces that are uniquely tailored to their specific location, climate, and community, moving away from the one-size-fits-all model of 20th century modernism. The magic doesn't stop at the screen. This digitally born, intuitively inspired design is then brought into the physical world through another transformative technology, digital fabrication. Robotic arms, guided by the complex data from these generative models, can now carve, print, or assemble building components with a precision and complexity that would be unthinkable by human hands alone. Three-dimensional printers can create uniquely shaped bricks or tiles that interlock in perfect, mortar-free patterns, reminiscent of Incan masonry but born from algorithmic calculation. Computer-controlled cutters can shape wooden beams into elegant, custom joints that are both structurally sound and aesthetically beautiful. This technology finally breaks the economic constraint that has pushed modern construction toward uniformity, the high cost of custom craftsmanship. For the first time, we can mass-produce uniqueness. We can fabricate 1,000 different, perfectly optimized components as easily as we once stamped out 1,000 identical ones, allowing for the return of ornate, highly specific, and locally responsive design without the prohibitive cost. This powerful convergence points toward a future that beautifully blends the best of both worlds. We can harness the computational power, predictive analytics, and global connectivity of our digital age to achieve levels of efficiency, safety, and sustainability that ancient engineers could scarcely imagine. Yet we can direct that power toward a goal they would have instantly recognized: the creation of deeply human-centric, resilient, and meaningful places. The future of design may not be a choice between the intuitive and the technological, but a synthesis where computers handle the complex calculations of energy flow and structural load, freeing up human designers to focus on what they do best: infusing spaces with poetry, cultural meaning, and a deep understanding of the human spirit. We are on the verge of reviving the spirit of the forgotten engineer, not by abandoning our tools, but by building ones wise enough to finally help us think like them again. The legacy of these forgotten engineers is far more than a collection of ancient techniques. It is a profound and urgent invitation to rethink our entire relationship with the built world. They stand as a testament to a different kind of intelligence, one that was not measured in calculations per second, but in centuries of sustained harmony. Their cities were not imposed upon the landscape, but emerged from a deep, patient conversation with it, a dialogue of observation, adaptation, and reverence. They understood in their bones that the most resilient structure is one that belongs to its place, that the most efficient system is one that leverages natural forces, and that the most beautiful space is one that nurtures the human spirit. This wisdom, written not on paper but in stone, water, and earth, is their timeless gift to us, as we stand at a critical crossroads of climate change and rapid urbanization. Their lessons have never been more vital. The challenges we face demand more than just technological fixes. They require a fundamental shift in philosophy. We are learning the hard way that a city designed solely for economic efficiency and automotive speed can be a lonely, fragile, and environmentally costly place. The models of the past offer a different path forward, one of integration over isolation, adaptation over imposition, and community over convenience. Imagine harnessing their principles today. Cities that manage stormwater with restored wetlands and permeable surfaces instead of vast concrete conduits. Neighborhoods that cool themselves with green corridors and passive ventilation inspired by wind catchers. and communities where local materials and vernacular styles create a sense of identity and belonging that globalized glass towers lack. This is not a call to abandon modern technology, but to direct it with a wiser, more humble compass. It is about blending the incredible analytical power of generative design and parametric modeling with the timeless, intuitive wisdom of place. It means using our satellites and sensors to understand a watershed with the same intimacy that an ancient Khmer water master once did, and then designing with that knowledge. It means valuing the qualitative wisdom of community elders and local craftspeople as highly as we value quantitative data from a spreadsheet. The goal is a synthesis, a future where our smartest cities are also the most human-centered, where our most advanced materials are also the most sustainable, and where our greatest engineering achievements are measured not just by their height or span, but by their ability to heal the planet and nourish the people who call them home. Honoring these master builders means more than just studying their ruins. It means embodying their spirit. It means becoming listeners and students of our own environments, prioritizing long-term resilience over short-term gain, and designing with a sense of ethical responsibility toward both people and the planet. It is about building for the seventh generation, not just the next fiscal quarter. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the ultimate blueprint for a better future may not be a document at all, but a mindset, one of humility, adaptability, and profound respect for the intricate web of life we are all a part of. Thank you for exploring these historical mysteries with us. We would love to hear which of these ancient engineering marvels inspires you the most. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe for more explorations into the forgotten wisdom of the